Tina Moore is the head of social media at New Zealand's largest media and entertainment organization, NZME. She is a social media specialist with 14 years of experience as a publisher, editor, creative director, and media strategist. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Tina Moore.
Hi. So nice to see that you're all still awake at this afternoon. I know it's really what someone mentioned, it was the graveyard shift, so if you feel the need to shake it out, I feel like I'm ready to kind of run some jazzercise with this gear, so if you need to, we can do that, but I think that we've got the most exciting topics this afternoon. I know everyone's been banging on about it all day, and I'm going to continue that right now, but I am going to be focusing a little bit more on the cautionary tale of influencer marketing. Thank you. I did walk out without that. Fantastic. I was half asleep myself. Not that it was boring, Phil. It was fantastic. So, it's all about trust. And I know we've heard this word over and over and over again, but I'm going to talk about influence and the relationship between that and trustworthiness. It's obviously an explosive growth phase. We've all talked about it. A lot of us are intrigued. I saw a show of hands. A lot of you have already done some work with influencers. But there are some really, there's been some really nasty, bad influencer campaigns, some really global ones. Who remembers Fire Festival from last year? Anyone? Yes, exactly. God, it was good. I loved looking at the memes and everyone's reactions. It was fantastic. It's like watching a slow train wreck. But what we can learn out of that is that influencers, you need to be carefully selected, managed, trained, vetted, and supported as well to make sure that they're doing the best thing for you and your brand and for them themselves as well and for their audiences and treating their audiences with the respect that they deserve. I'm also going to talk about how important it is to be fully above board with your disclosure with your any influencer marketing campaign. And I'm going to get really granular on how you can create quality campaign briefs and agreements that will mitigate those issues. So if anything does go wrong, you've got the backup there. And a little word of warning about fake influence. I know we can't not discuss that. It is the big elephant in the room with influencer marketing. So I'll talk a little bit about how to spot that as well. And finally, I'll wrap up with a little case study that shows that influencer marketing isn't just for millennials. One of our most successful case studies at NZME was actually with regards to a retirement village. So really not millennial at all. So what do I know? A little bit about myself. I am the head of social media at NZME, which is New Zealand Media and Entertainment. It's New Zealand's largest media business. We represent the major daily newspapers, all the regional newspapers, over 20 radio stations. I think we pretty much reach every single New Zealander every single day with our brands through print, digital, and radio. The only thing we don't do is television. We also, aside from those brands, we naturally lend ourselves to having influencers. So those are radio hosts, journalists, opinion leaders, and also within our own staff, just a lot of the industry lends itself to young, influential social media stars working with us as well. So over the years, we've noticed that traditional media, obviously, is kind of becoming less sexy. It still does the job, of course, but every brief that we get from commercial clients nowadays does have an influencer element in it, and so we've started responding to that. So I've heard and seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of social media influencer marketing campaigns. So, caution. Consumers are acutely aware that they're being sold to, regardless of whether you disclose it or not. They're not dumb. They know exactly when there's being product placement. There's no damage to you or your brand or to the influencer in being completely open about it. Both Facebook and Instagram have rolled out those paid partnership tags, and we've experimented with using them and not, because in New Zealand, we're not actually legally bound to do that. We don't have to. So we've actually tested campaigns where we've used it and not. There's no difference in the reach or engagement versus whether you use it or not. So don't be afraid to be completely above board and use those disclosure tags. In New Zealand, as I said, there's no legal regulations around disclosure, but there are guidelines. We follow those because as a traditional media company, we are always under the spotlight by our Advertising Standards Authority, and we just, we ought to be above board. I don't know what the rules and regulations are around the rest of APAC, but I know in Australia they do actually have federal laws around having to disclose that through the use of #ad or #spawn. But both of those platforms, by formalizing the disclosure, they are taking an important step towards the growing perception that sometimes creators are deceiving the community. And so they're doing those things to make sure the platforms are still a place of great authenticity. So as Jan actually put the post up this morning of Mark Zuckerberg's announcement about the Facebook algorithm changes, and in that post and a couple of subsequent posts, he did clearly signal that this year is the year of trust, and he really wants to bring those platforms back to being trustworthy and away from the crowded, cluttered space of clickbait and fake news. So really, media especially, unfortunately, my job as one of representing one of the news publishers, we are heavily under the spotlight right now. And I can tell you that we are hemorrhaging audience thanks to this new algorithm change. We're doing everything that we can to mitigate it. But the main thing that we are doing is to really dial back and look at the content that we're creating and making sure that it is absolutely genuine, trustworthy content, making sure that we respect our audience through quality journalism, fact-checking, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to influencers, this is where you really need to make sure that you're working with genuinely trustworthy people. So yeah, the issue of the hidden endorsement. So, sometimes influencers are paid. Sometimes they might get free product. There might not actually be an exchange of money. But, the fact that they might have been given a free car for the weekend, or they've had their teeth whitened, or they've had their hair done, and they've mentioned something about it, is still really obvious that they've had that service exchange. That is a hidden endorsement. So, that can actually have a misleading impact for the influencer themselves, but also for the brand and product. And, people are very hearty with their feedback on social media, in case you hadn't noticed. Some really, really gnarly stuff going on right now. Have you guys, Ashy Bynes, anybody? In Australia, she's a really big fitness and lifestyle blogger. Unfortunately, she's been caught out having some lack of disclosure and doing some hidden endorsement kind of stuff. And there's now social media accounts that actually rival her own following around how poor she's handled those things. So disclosing that connection is really, really important to fairness and truth about the advertisement. So trust is super key. This is just a really good example of, this is a little bit old now, a Song of Style in a paid partnership with Volvo. She could have done this post. Everybody would have known it was something that she would have been given anyway. There's no difference to the content or the message by her disclosing that. So this is an example of it done well. In my business, obviously, with our influencers being part of our radio stations or journalists, they technically work for our other media brands, and so they're not actually on board as influencers separately. So oftentimes we've had commercial briefs that require them to do something because we've got an advertiser advertising on the channel that they work on, for instance. Let's say in New Zealand, one of the local telecom agencies is Vodafone, and they are a big advertiser on our station, The Hits. And because of their advertising, they seem to expect that our announcers will then use Vodafone themselves, will represent them. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. You can't make an influencer love your brand or speak about it. So we have to make sure that they actively choose to participate. It's very, very obvious when somebody is doing something they don't want to do, when they're being forced to say something, and it comes across forced. This, excuse the poor language in it, I did come across this in my newsfeed very recently, a friend of mine calling out influencers for promoting products that they don't actually love. I don't know if you guys have seen a bunch of this, skinny teas, teeth whitening gadgets, blackhead masks, they're all over the place. I've tried a bunch of them myself because I'm a sucker like that, and some of them are actually really rubbish, and that makes me really distrust the people who have said they're amazing. So, fake influence. It happens everywhere. It's very, very easy. It's most common on Instagram, where within 2 minutes you can have bought yourself 10,000 fans. You can also buy yourself ongoing engagement, so it looks as though you've got people commenting on your content. It's incredibly easy to do it and incredibly cheap. To do that, representing influencers ourselves, we have to make sure that we're selling genuine influencers. So we make sure that we manually review the accounts of followers. There are tools out there that you can, like Social Blade, where you can pop an Instagram handle into and check to see roughly when their followers grew. And if you see big spikes in the graph, you can kind of get an idea that maybe they've purchased a little 1,000 or 2,000 or 20,000 or more. But we manually review the most recent 10 posts, make sure that the comments are relating to the actual content, not just things like, cool, okay, love this pic. They're very obvious comment bots. So make sure that you do your due diligence when you're selecting influencers, making sure that they're genuine people with genuine followings. Also watch out for, I know it's not technically off limits or against the rules, but there are engagement pods. Who's heard of an engagement pod? Just 1 or 2 people. Okay, well, welcome to the shifty world of how social media influencers can work with themselves and a bunch of, let's say, 100 or 200 others. They will let that group of people know that they're about to post something, and they will all go and comment on it themselves, thereby sort of gaming the engagement rate. But they're talking to other influencers. They're not necessarily talking to your customers or their audience, and they're manually gaming that. So being aware, and maybe look up engagement pods. They're everywhere, especially in that fashion and beauty realm. Okay, the other thing is rogue influencers. Yes, they do go rogue. All humans, we're all human, we all do it sometimes. Even though they might have executed your particular campaign perfectly to the T, they could do something outside of that would bring your relationship with them into disrepute. So, I mean, I'm going to be completely honest that we had an example of this in my own business where one of our radio hosts went and, let me say, discredited another social media influencer, and they had a very public kind of spat over social media. And the fact is, she had an endorsement with one of our clients. That client got very unhappy because of the very public nature and the language used, and we lost that client, and that cost us a lot of money and her reputation and her job. So being sure that you're working with people who are going to represent the values of your company is really, really important as well, not just for your specific campaign, but overall. Yes, Fire Festival. Expectation versus reality. Everything about Fire Festival was a complete disaster, except for the hilarity that ensued in the memes afterwards. But sometimes clients can bring the influencer into disrepute too. So something that you do, or something, in this case, the festival didn't live up to the expectations, and the reality is that those influencers' reputations were tarnished by that. And in fact, some of them are actually now being sued by some of the festival goers. So best practice, I will quickly run through these because they're kind of the boring nuts and bolts, but you'll have them in the slides, and if you ever want to execute an influencer campaign, you have this nice handy list. Always making sure that you include these things in an influencer brief. Oh, good, I can see lots of phones taking photos of that. This is good. So always making sure that you make as much detail as possible. Scope of campaign. What creative assets are you going to get yourself? What are you expecting them to make for you? Whether there are hashtags, links, the number and date range of the posts, what your KPIs are for reporting, what do you want to hear back. There is no point asking later what you are hoping to get out of it. You need to be very specific right up front. Making sure that you have any competitor exclusions or any period of exclusion around them talking about competitor products. Any budget for amplification, which you absolutely should include. Don't expect there to be organic reach. It is dead. Even if you are using your influencer for their audience, make sure you amplify that. Making sure that you talk about the usage rights. How long can you use the image that they created or any other content that they've created for you, and how long can you use it for before you have to then perhaps pay them again for extended usage of it. And of course, who does what and when, what the communication process is, and all that kind of jazz. So yeah, agreements makes things nice and tidy for everybody in case anything goes wrong or anything else. Making sure that you outline the deliverables very, very clearly from the start will make everybody have a nice, happy ending, which is great. We take it very, very seriously at NZME. We even go to the extreme lengths of making indemnity contracts and liability limitations. We have a lot of paperwork involved in every campaign, but it covers our ass, and it's very, very important. The normal trust indicators are becoming less reliable. So by trust indicators, I mean likes, shares, comments. The fact is there are, as I mentioned, bots and engagement pods where, those things aren't necessarily as reliable as what we used to think now. You can't just say, this is a winning campaign because it had 5,000 likes. Were those likes real? Were they by people who genuinely wanted to see your product? And so it's not as simple as what you see is what you get anymore. And millennials are onto that, especially millennials. They know that this is gamed a lot of the time. So again, it comes down to that trust. Are you working with a trustworthy influencer? So I'm going to wrap up just by explaining this campaign, which was for MetLife Care, a very big retirement village. They've got hundreds of them all over New Zealand. You'd never have thought a retirement village would go for an influencer campaign. But indeed, you're thinking about who the target market is. It's generally the children of the elderly, so anyone sort of aged 40 plus. And of course, they're all on social media. They're all on Facebook. So we went with an integrated campaign to target them via print, the Herald website, through our radio stations, and video and social media. Unfortunately, my video has gone it's glitched, so I can't play you the video. But if anybody wants a copy of that, then feel free to come and ask me afterwards. I'm more than happy to share it with you. But it was a really, really interesting way of using influencers who happen to be this fellow here. His name is Sam Wallace. He happens to be the very friendly weatherman on the breakfast television show in New Zealand, plus also he is also on our Hits radio station in the morning. So he's just a nice, friendly guy. He went and interviewed a whole bunch of elderly people doing cool things at MetLife Care homes. And he was the guy who kind of tied it all together through all of these channels. All right, I've literally nailed it on the time and keeping things on track. I am going to be sitting in on the panel with Wendy and Phil as well. So if you have any questions, you can ask me then. But I'm so pleased to see that you're all still awake and looking forward to hearing Wendy speak as well. Thank you so much.